Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Harold, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. You know, I've never been to an AA meeting where we didn't open the meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer. So why don't we do that now? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. You know, folks, rarely have we seen a person fail who has conscientiously contributed his or her $5 to the Pot of Gold raffle. You know, when I was asked to introduce Hank this evening, I said to myself, gee, Harold, this is a perfect opportunity. You could open up the 1985 Pot of Gold raffle. But guess what? All of you are in luck. I didn't have time to get the tickets printed. Say, did you all hear about the tipsy driver who had been in an accident? When he was being questioned by the police officer, he stated, I was just driving along, officer, when some drunk ran into me. And the lush said, how did you know he was drunk? Asked the policeman. And he had to be, answered the lush, he was driving a tree. Or did you all hear about the guy whose drinking career caused him to neglect his teeth so badly that he ended up wearing dentures? After joining AA, he used to say that his drinking drove him to extraction. I thought I'd get a few more groans from that one. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Hank J. from Palmdale, California.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hank Johnson, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. I'm very glad to be here tonight. My God, what a room, huh? I drank for a lot of years. I started drinking when I was 18. You know, a year after Debbie quit, I started. And, I did a little behind the gym drinking before that, you know, but this was big time. I went into a bar, and in California, you're supposed to be 21, but I passed for 21, and they served me, and immediately I became a man. You know, a man can buy a drink over a bar without being asked how old he is. And I never had to learn another thing for the rest of my life. I knew everything right there. And I could play the jukebox over in the corner just as good as the rest of the guys. I just felt comfortable in that bar. I hear people talk about when they came into AA how comfortable, and they just felt like they came home, you know. I sure didn't feel that way at all, but I felt that way in the bar. And I could take a few drinks and look at myself in the mirror and get better looking after each drink. And I just hung out in that place. Every chance I got, I went there. And I met my wife in a bar. Where else do you meet girls? Certainly not in church, that's for sure. We got married and bought a little tract house out in California. Nothing down, naturally. And the payments were $56 a month. And she wanted the 3-bedroom, but that was $63 a month, and I couldn't afford that, so we bought this little house at $56 a month. And you know, I had trouble making the payments, because you see, I used my money to drink with. And the payment would come due on the first of the month, and I'd say, oh hell, I'll skip it this month, I'll double up next month. Next month would come along, and I'd have to come up with $112. My God, where am I going to get that kind of money? Then I'd have to stiff one of my other creditors, and I'd make the payment. And we almost lost that house several times, and we finally sold it before they foreclosed, the final foreclosure, and moved in with my father for free. When we moved out there, we had a little girl, girl that she had prior by a previous marriage, and it turned out she was pregnant. I didn't start saving for that baby until about a week before it was due. You see, my problem is money. I just don't earn enough money. That's all. I got this rotten job, it just don't pay enough. And if she would just go to work or help out somehow, why, things would be a lot better. So in order to pay for the doctor and hospital bill, I went to the Pacific Finance Company and I borrowed the money to pay for the doctor bill and hospital expenses. And when my son finally turned 25 years old and I finally got sober on AA, I finally got Pacific Finance paid off. See, there was always a crisis in my life. I'd just about get them paid off and I'd have to consolidate my bills again. And for some reason, I'd get that money in my hand and it would kind of self-destruct on the way home. And I couldn't pay, I never did get all my bills paid off, so then I'd have to go to another finance company and borrow. And sometimes I'd borrow at a bank. And a lot of times I had all three going at the same time. At the end of the year, you know, about this time of the year, start figuring out how much interest you pay for income tax purposes. I'm trying to figure out, what am I making all these payments for? You know? What am I buying with all these payments? How come I'm paying so much interest? You know? I could never figure it out, because I wasn't buying anything. And they don't finance $100 cars, you know. And I finally figured it out after I got sober. I financed 30 years of drinking. Every time I took a drink, I paid an extra 10, 15 cents in interest to the Pacific Finance Company. Money is my problem, you know, not drinking. I'm glad I finally got those guys paid off. My drunkalogue is it's got to be the most boring story you've ever heard in your entire life. I just wish I had a more exciting story to tell you. You know, you hear exciting things from the podium. You know, guys talk about they go into a bar and they punch everybody out in a bar. The cops come and they punch the cops out. And they get thrown in a cell and they walk over to the bunk they want and pull the guy out of the bunk and punch him out too. Now, that's drinking. That's exciting drinking. My God, what a thrill. I wish I could tell you I did that. You know. And I know of another guy, that mutual friend, that used to drive through a tunnel at 65 miles an hour and decided to make a U-turn right in the middle of the tunnel. Now that's drinking. My sponsor jumped over to the Texas State Insane Asylum, waddled his terry cloth robe, sober. That's exciting stuff. You know. All I ever did is just kind of sat around and drank. Played a lot of phonograph records, watched quite a bit of TV. Once in a while I'd read a book. Nothing very heavy, just a condensed version in the Reader's Digest. And, you know, my wife that creates excitement used to kick me out of the house quite a bit. She'd come home and see see me sitting there, and she'd say, "Get out." And you know, it never occurred to me to argue with her. She said, "Go," I went, that's all. And I never moved very far from home, though, just down the street. And then I'd work my way back in. And I was in and out, back and forth. And she divorced me 3 times. The last time she divorced me, I finally got the idea, you know. You want a divorce, you've got it. You can have the house, you can have the furniture, you can have everything. All I want is my stack of old 78 records. They're collector items, and I want them. And she was glad to get rid of them and me. And so I moved to a little shack at Hermosa Beach, California, about a half a block from the ocean. And it was a little garage house that they had converted into a living quarters. And it was a little room, a little bit larger than this stage here, about 12 by 15 room, really. And but I was thrilled to live there, because half a block from the ocean, I knew I was going to be able to get up early in the morning and go down to the beach and run along the ocean, really get in shape. I was looking forward to that. Yeah. As far as I know, the water was down there. I just never got around. You hear people introduce themselves as being alcoholics and drug addicts and alcoholics and this and that. And I'm an alcoholic and a procrastinator. I heard this Alateen speaker one time talk, and his mother, he used to say, "Why do you procrastinate so much?" And he says, "What does that mean?" She says, "Why don't you look it up in the dictionary?" And he says, "Oh, I will later." I identify with that kid, I'll tell you that. I just never got around to doing anything. I postponed living for 30 years. Rip Van Winkle only slept for 20, I slept for 30. And sometimes things are a little strange. They seem a little familiar, and I know this is a little, that I've done this before, but I can't remember where or when, And But I just wasted 30 years. I shouldn't really say that, because I finally got here, and that was good. I trained for this place quite a bit. But I just used to sit around and drink, and a typical day for me was I'd wake up 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm already an hour late to work, so I'd throw my clothes on real fast and shave and get in that car and weave in and out of traffic and break all the traffic laws. And I had to get to work, because you see, I had that fear of impending doom. I knew I was going to be fired by the time I got there, because you see, I should have worked yesterday. I left all these papers all over, and if the boss were to look in my desk drawer, my God, he'd find papers in there. Some of them were months old. They were too old to turn in. If I turned them in, I'd get fired. If I didn't turn them in, I was going to be fired. And I knew it was all going to happen today. I was sure of it. And I'd get to work, and I'd check my desk out the first thing. Everything's okay today. Go get a cup of coffee, come back to my desk, shuffle papers, and try to look interested, and make excuses to my customers. And they'd want to know where their stuff was. And I'd say, "You mean you didn't get that? I'll personally take care of that myself today." The class of help we hire nowadays, you just can't depend on them. And sometimes I'd use the computer one. That's a good one. They're still using that one today. The computer's been down for the last 6 days. As soon as it gets fixed, I'll take care of it. I'm one of the originators of that excuse. I used that excuse before we even had a computer in our office. And I'd shuffle papers and make excuses until about 11:45, a respectable time to go to lunch. And I'd go to the bar. It was conveniently located right next door to where I worked. And they sold martinis over there. And I like martinis. And during the lunch hour, they sold double martinis for $1. The regular martinis were 75 cents. But who ever heard of having one martini, right? So I'd say to myself, you're going to have two anyhow, so you might as well buy the $1 one you'll save 50 cents. God knows you need the money bad. And I'd order that dollar martini, and I'd get to sip it on it, you know, and I'd kind of check my drink against the guy sitting next to me at the bar. And I'd say to myself, who the hell do they think they're kidding around here? This is no double. It's a little larger than the 75-cent one. If it was really a double, they'd be charging more money for it. You know, I've been around, I know these things. They can't kid me, so I better have another one. And then I'd have another one, then I'd have another one, then I'd have another one. Then I'd call the office and tell them, I forgot to tell you, but I'm going on a lot of calls this afternoon. Take messages, I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And I'd get in my car and I'd head towards the beach. And I'd stop and buy the cheapest bottle of vodka I could find, whatever was on sale that day. And I'd get home about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'm an extra neat drunk. I'd get home and I'd hang up my clothes real carefully so the creases fall properly, and put my shoes away and my tie and everything. And I'd put my pajamas on. And I'd sit on the edge of the bed, and I'd untap that cheap vodka, and I'd take a big, big jolt out of it, you know, several swallows. And I'd say to myself, well, done it again today. You know, this cannot continue. You know, you're not the only guy that's ever been divorced. You're not the only guy that's ever been in debt. Why in the hell don't you do something about it? All you do is sit around and talk about it. You never take any action on anything. At least you could do, you can't do anything about your marriage, but at least you could get a second job and maybe get out of debt anyhow. And then I'd say, wait a minute, I don't need to get a second job. I'm in sales. And if you're in sales, you know, you can make practically any amount of money you want to, within reason, you know, of course. And yeah, that's right. Yeah. Starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock. I'm going to get down that damn office by 7. I'm going to knock out paperwork for a couple hours. And when that phone starts ringing tomorrow, I'm going to be ready to do business. And for the rest of this year, I'm going to devote my entire waking life making money. No fooling around this year. You know, maybe I'll go, you know, I'm not even going to drink for the rest of this year. Maybe I'll go to a New Year's Eve party and have a few drinks. But you know, this is the year I'm going to play catch up. I'm going to get squared away and get out of debt. Geez, I don't know about you people, but when I have those brilliant ideas, you know, I got cause to celebrate, so I have another drink. And then I get to thinking, if I triple my income, I'm going to be out of debt in no time. What are you going to do with all the money coming in then? One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a white Lincoln Continental car. I'm going to drive it up to that house where she still lives. And I'll do that about midnight. On the way up, though, I'll stop at the Hallmark card shop and I'll buy the most beautiful card they've got in the place. Something with a lot of sentimental poetry on it. And on the left-hand side, I'll write, thanks for all the good years, H. Not Henry or Hank, just H. Then I'll get a gold-plated key for that car. I'll drive it up like at midnight and I'll just kind of coast into the parking spot right in front of the house. You know, so you can't miss the car. Then I'll tiptoe up on the porch and I'll put that envelope in the mail chute. And the next morning she'll get up and she'll go through her routine, get her mail. She'll look, and naturally she'll open the big envelope first. And the key will fall out. Wonder what that key is, she'll say. And then she'll read this sentimental poetry. And, you know, it's the real mushy kind. And tears will just come down, just roll down her cheeks. She'll just be just excruciatingly painful poetry, if you know what I mean. And then she'll look over on the other side and she'll say, thanks for all the good years, H. And then she'll look at that key. She'll look outside in front of the house and she'll see that white Lincoln Continental out there. Beautiful, brand new, shiny, gorgeous car. And the gold-plated key and that card, everything. She'll put it all together that that's her automobile. then she won't think I'm so bad. Then she'll be sorry, by God, that she got rid of me. I don't know about you guys, but I get a big thrill out of giving those big gifts like that. So I have another drink. Play another record. Something like Billy Eckstine singing, "Who Can I Turn To?" And then I'd look at the clock, it'd be 11:15. My God, I cannot believe where this day is gone. It's just impossible. It can't be 11:15. Then I'm almost out of booze. The liquor store closes at 11, and I'd throw my clothes on over my pajamas, and I'd run 2 blocks to the liquor store to get there before it closed. That's when I first started jogging, about that time. But I had to get there before the place closed. It was crucial, you know. And all the Smirnoffs, I always bought the better brands there in the neighborhood. I wouldn't want them to think I was cheap right there near where I lived. And then I could stroll back to my shack with peace and comfort, security for the rest of the night. And I'd get back home and I'd have dinner, a cold hot dog out of the icebox. And then I'd sit on the edge of the bed and play some more records, and fantasize some more. And I'd start rehearsing the speech I was going to have to give at the banquet, because I knew I was going to be Salesman of the Year. And somewhere in there I'd pass out. And I'd wake up the next morning, it'd be 10 o'clock, and I'm already an hour late to work. And I'd throw my clothes on real fast, and I'd shave and get in that car and weave in and out of traffic. I just knew by the time I got there I was going to be fired, because you see, I should have worked yesterday. I left all these papers all over, and some of them were months old, and if I had this feeling of impending doom. I knew this was it. And I'd get to work, and I'd check my desk out, everything the same as yesterday. I'd get a cup of coffee, back to my desk, shuffle papers, try to look interested, make excuses to my customers. And at a respectable time, I'd go next door to the bar. It was conveniently located right next door to where I lived. I'd go over there and make my big decision of the day over there, whether to have the $1 one or the 75-cent one. And then I'd have another one, and then I'd have another one, and then I'd have another one. And then I'd call the office, tell them I forgot to tell you I'm going to have a call. Take messages. Be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And I'd stop and buy a cheap bottle of vodka. Get home about 2 or 2:30 and hang up my clothes real carefully and put my pajamas on and sit at the edge of the bed. I'd untap this cheap vodka and take a big, put an old record on the turntable. Something like Billy Eckstine singing, "Who Can I Turn To?" And I'd say to myself, this cannot continue. You're not the only guy that's ever been divorced. You're not the only guy that's ever been in debt. Why the hell don't you do something about it? All you do is sit around and talk. You never take any action on anything. Get a second job. At least you can get squared away. I don't need to get a second job. I'm in sales. It wasn't long before I was buying white Lincoln Continentals. I didn't do that once or twice. I did that hundreds of times. Towards the end of the month, the boss would want to know, "Are you in sales here?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm in sales." "Well, how about making a sale?" And I'd say, "Don't worry about a thing. I'm a fast finisher." And I was, because I was afraid. I was scared. I thought he'd fire me, and fear motivated me, I'll tell you that. And I was afraid, so I'd work around the clock. And I always made my quota in this company. And I always exceeded my quota. And at the end of the year, the company I worked for, if you exceed your quota, they give you a plaque with your name on it, big plaque. your name for outstanding salesmanship and product knowledge and being the type of representative we want to represent this company and all that good stuff. And for 8 drunken years in a row, I won a plaque each year. And then I got sober. I didn't win a plaque for 8 years. See, I lost my incentive. I wasn't afraid anymore. And, so they fire me. I'll find another job, And they talk about, when you come to AA, God's going to take care of us, right? I mean, that's what they talk about. Everything's going to be all right now that you're sober. And so, who needs to work? I always showed up at work on time. I didn't have any trouble after I stopped drinking. I showed up on time. I thought you were supposed to get a raise just for showing up on time. What a supreme sacrifice that is for some of us to get there on time. And no, after 2 years of sobriety, I walked in the office one day and the guy fired me. And I said, "You can't fire me. I've got an outstanding sales record with this company." He said, "Not lately, you don't." And so he said, "So you're through?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to let you fire me. I'm going to go see the regional sales manager." And I did. I went to see him in his plush office in the Century City area. And I used to say that I took my 5th step with him, but what I really did is I sniveled and cried to him. I said, "My God, I've been with this company over 10 years now, and the guy wants to fire me down there. I just can't understand it with my outstanding sales record and everything." What he doesn't know is that over 2 years ago, I completely changed my life. I quit drinking, trying to make it with my wife and the kids, and trying to pay my bills on time, become a citizen in the community again. Now this joker wants to fire me. I just can't believe it. And the regional manager said, "Well, it's all very interesting. I wasn't even aware that you had a problem with booze. I hope you and your wife make it together and everything." But he said, "I can't interfere with what goes on at the branch office." He says, "I'll tell you what I'll do, though. I'll put you on paid leave of absence for a very short period of time. You claim to be a salesman, go sell yourself to another branch office. We got 80 of them." And that's what I did. And I'm still with this company. See, what happened to me is what happens to, I've seen it happen to a lot of people in AA. After you get a year or two, in my case about 2, I just got so damn spiritual. I just became above, just like one notch above everybody else, and I didn't have to work, And I just kind of sailed off into the blue, and I was just a little bit better than most. And I just sailed way up there into the heavens. And finally my sponsor told me, he says, some of us just get so heavenly that we just become of no earthly good to anybody. And that's what happened to me. He also pointed out that in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it states in there that it's okay to have your head in the clouds, but you should keep your feet firmly planted on the ground, and perhaps to take these steps, that there's work to be done. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since. And it kind of scares me every once in a while now. I win a plaque again, and I'm trying not, but not out of fear. I'm not motivated by fear anymore. And I got way ahead of my story. Before all that happened, I got a call from my ex-wife, and she said, "Come and get your drunken son. He's just like you are." It seemed that he had turned 16, and he was going to high school and getting into minor scrapes, nothing really big, but just nickel and dime trouble, but just more than she could cope with. And he went to a party one night, and he came home drunk and threw up on the carpet or something. And that was it. That's all she could handle. So she called me and said, "Come and get your drunken son, just like you are." Never occurred to me to argue with her. She said, "Come and get him." That's what I did. I don't know why I never could talk up to her, but I just couldn't. She said, so I had to do it. And so he, as a punishment to him, he had to come and live with me. He didn't want to come and live with me, and I didn't want him to come and live with me, but she said, so we had to do it. He used to come and visit me occasionally before that on a weekend, stay overnight maybe. And if I wasn't drinking, I tried to figure out what I should say to him. You know, what do you say to a 16-year-old kid? And so I just figured, so I'd lecture him about, I'm really disappointed in your grades. With your intelligence, you should be getting much better grades. And with your physique, my God, you're 6 foot tall. You ought to be playing football. Your personality, you should be student body president. All the things that I kind of wish I would have been when I was in school. And he'd just look at me, But if I was drinking, I just tended to slobber all over. I would tell him how much I loved him. And I'd corner him, I'd get him so that he couldn't get away. And I would tell him how much I loved him. I'd say, all the trouble your mother and I have had through the years has nothing to do with you. We love you. You were no accident. You were a planned child. You're a love child. And he used to just cringe. He just couldn't stand it. And I couldn't stop once I got started. I just cried and everything. I just really poured it on. And somehow he'd escaped. The next morning I'd wake up and I was just ashamed of myself. Not ashamed that I was drunk. Ashamed that I told my son I loved him. See, if I'm from the old school where you don't tell anybody how you feel. And I was just ashamed of myself. And I would drive him home. I couldn't look him in the eye and drop him off. And so as a punishment to him, he had to come and live with me. And but that turned out to be a good thing, because that was the start of a beautiful relationship that we've got going to this day. And wasn't very much longer than my ex moved in with us too. And we got to talking one day, you know how that is, and we decided that we were really miserable people, but we seemed to be more miserable apart than we were together. And why don't we try this thing one more time? All we've got is each other. Our daughter by then is split long before that. And our son was getting ready to graduate high school, and all we had was each other. So why are we doing this to each other? Why don't we treat each other better? And we just got caught up in the moment, and we decided made a lot of hasty plans. And she said, I won't even fight you on your drinking anymore. In fact, I'll join you. And I should have been suspicious right then and there. See, all the years I was married to her, she never drank. She can't drink. She's allergic to alcohol, that woman. Cannot drink. She'd take a drink and gag. We'd go to a party and I'd get a big glass, put a lot of 7-Up in, a little bit of vodka. Come on, drink a few of these. We're at a party. We're supposed to be having fun here. She could never drink. She'd end up throwing up or getting something, passing out or what. She never could drink. And so when she told me she'd join me, I just let that one just sail right over my head. And little did I know that during that 2 or 3 year period we were apart, she had taught herself how to drink. They talk about practicing alcoholics. She practiced quite a bit. And she was practicing on a daily basis. And it turned out that she did so much practicing that she was damn near perfect when she moved in. She could drink any kind of a drink straight and not even make a face. And, she claims that she was an alcoholic before she even took the first drink. She was just waiting like a stick of dynamite to be lit. And, some of us, I guess that's the way we are. We're alcoholics. The first drink we take, I had a lot of good years drinking, seriously. I had a lot of fun. I used to go to a lot of jazz joints and drink and listen to these musicians, and I just loved it. It was great. I didn't have any hangovers or anything. And somewhere in there, I became allergic to booze. I crossed that so-called invisible line into alcoholism, and I drank myself into alcoholism. The same thing happened to me with penicillin. I took penicillin several times. And one time I had a sore throat, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me a shot of penicillin. It was this kind, that just releases a little bit each hour or every 2 or 3 hours. And I didn't even get home with that. I was just all itchy and scratchy. And I wound up in the hospital for 8 days with penicillin poisoning. I almost died. And the doctor told me, don't ever take penicillin again. You might die. And I've never had a bit of trouble with that. If they had Penicillin Anonymous, I'd have about 35 years right now. But the same thing happened to me with booze, you see, and only I was too dumb to quit. And I just kept drinking. And so anyhow, then a typical day was that I'd wake up late and go down and shuffle papers and get home about 2 and put my pajamas on and drink and fantasize and play these old phonograph records and dream about the good old days and all that. And then here comes my son home from school. And it'd be like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'd say to him, who the hell do you think you're kidding? School doesn't even get out till 3, and you're home here at 2:30. Now, you ditched class, or maybe you've ditched all day, I don't know. But, I'm wise to this. And I'd stand there in my pajamas with a bottle of vodka in my hand, and I would ask him, how the hell do you ever expect to amount to anything? If you don't apply yourself in this world, my son, you haven't got a chance. I'm really worried about you. He'd look at me funny, and he always had 3 or 4 guys with him, and they looked at me funny too. And they'd go off surfing or whatever they were doing. And then a little while later, my wife had come home. And I'm kind of a grouchy guy when I'm not drinking. I just soon sit in the corner and watch TV or something. Just don't bother me. Don't ask me any questions. And you're free to do anything you want to do. Don't ask me for any money, and you're absolutely free to just do anything you want to do. But you give me one drink, and all that changes. And I don't care who you are. You're the most interesting person I have ever met in my entire life. I want to hear your life story from day one. And I'm prepared to sit up all night with you and hear your plans for the future. As long as we got booze, I'm with you all the way. My wife, on the other hand, is a friendly type. And she knows everybody in the neighborhood. And she knows the girls at the supermarket, checking out the groceries. She knows their names, their husbands' names, how many children they have. And, I don't know how she finds all that stuff out. I can go into the same market, and I always have to, for 20 years, I have to show my ID to cash a check. But she just immediately, she knows people. And, but you give her one drink, and all that changes. And all the pent-up emotions and hostilities of a lifetime come out in that first drink. And she just gets meaner than hell, folks. And I'm not here to take my wife. She wasn't able to come with me. I'm not here to take her inventory, you understand. But I am going to tell you a few of the things she did. It'll just help you understand me a little bit better. She'd come home, I'd be glad to... I love everybody when I'm drinking, but especially my family. I just, how fortunate you are to have a wonderful son and daughter and wife. Just really lucky. And she'd come home, I just delighted to see her. And she was delighted to see me. And I'd pour her a drink, and I'd pour myself about the 20th one or more, and we'd have our first drink of the day together. And I'd start getting kind of cozy. And she'd start, halfway through the drink, she'd start getting standoffish. And by the time she finished the first drink, she was in a blackout. And she just changed, you know. She just completely changed personalities. You've heard of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. That was her. And she did stuff like throw the Christmas tree, lights and all, out the back door. She took a hammer and broke my little Sony TV, you know. Bang, one shot. It was dead. Killed it, dead. Just because I was laughing at a program. And she used to break my old 78 records. Just because I played them more than once. I don't know about you, but I get hung up on songs. And I'll play some song that I've heard for the first time 30 years ago, you know, or longer. And I just played it 2 days ago, and I'll play it, my God, that sounds good. And I play it one more time. Then I play it again, and again, and again, and again. And sometimes I get hung up with just one trumpet toot. I lay that needle right in there, and I toot. I hear that thing one more time, and I just put it in. I used to drive her crazy, and she'd walk over to the phonograph and take that record off and just smash it. My God, it's a priceless 78. You can't replace those. Good, I'll never have to hear it again. And one time she walked over to the phonograph and just took the arm and just bent it up. No, it was a metal arm. I don't know how she got that strength that she could do that. I couldn't play any more records that night, I'll tell you that. Next morning I got a pair of pliers and a wrench and a hammer and everything. I tried to straighten that damn thing out. I couldn't get it straightened out. I don't know how she had the strength to do that. And then she never remembered a thing, she said. I never knew about blackouts until I came to AA. I don't know what's worse, remembering or not remembering. I remember. It really got bad again, you know, and we had been going to group therapy off and on for 15 years or so, and we'd gone to every kind of therapy there was, and we had started back to a couples-only workshop. You know, that's fun. That's where married couples go, you know, 3 or 4 couples go, and there's a therapist there, and then we all cop out on one another. She used to tell that therapist how much I drank in front of all those people. And I used to just cringe. And she, why don't you tell them how you drank a 5th of vodka before I came home from work last night? Why don't you tell them how you finished the 2nd 5th after you got home? And I'd walk out of those sessions, you know, my guts would just be on fire. I could hardly wait to get a drink. I would have taken a drink anyway, but I could hardly wait to get one. And because, you see, it used to stir up my feelings, and I don't like that. Whenever I get a feeling, good or bad, I take a drink. You got to be cool. You know, you've got to be cool. You can't show your emotions where I come from. And so it just got bad. Things were just getting bad. And so I told her, I says, you know, I allowed you to kick me out of all these other houses that we lived in. But I moved here first. Therefore, you go this time. And I said, I'm going to go to my brother's house tonight. And when I come back tomorrow morning, I expect you gone. That's more notice than you ever gave me. And so I went to my brother's house. It seems he didn't have very much better luck with women than I did. We had a lot to talk about. We sat up all night and philosophized. And while I was gone, my wife decided to commit suicide again. She was always committing suicide. She was suicidal. That was another one of her character defects. And even after she got on the program, she was on the program for about a year, and she was still committing suicide on a regular basis. And this one day, something really bad happened. She was going to do it again, and then she remembered she was the cookie lady at the meeting, and so they were depending on her at the meeting, so she had to postpone it. her sponsor finally got to her and said, "You better knock that crap off, huh? One of these days you're going to hurt yourself bad." But this night she was going to do it in a really dramatic fashion, and in a blackout, before she did it, why, she went into the closet where my clothes were hanging and took a knife and just slashed every stitch of clothes that I owned. Even took the knife, he cut my ties in half, and ripped my shirts, and even took the knife and stabbed my damn shoes. And just made a complete shambles out of everything. And then took the rags that she had made and put them around the doors and the windows of this old place we lived. And turned the oven on, the gas on in the oven. Went to bed. Next morning she woke up, you know. Nothing happened, you know. That old place was so drafty with a real old house. It was a half a block from the ocean. The wind used to whistle through those boards. You could have turned the gas on 10 ovens and they would never smell it. So she survived again. She looked around all these clothes and she just could not believe what she had done. And when I came home, I couldn't believe it either. Then our son came home and looked around. He thought we were moving again. We moved quite a bit too. And that was our bottom. We hit bottom. And, you know, when I'm from a good family. My wife's from a good family. When we got married, we had some wonderful plans. We were going to do some really good things with our lives. But instead, we just sat around and drank every bit of goodness out of our lives. And from then on, things were not good at all. From then on, it was not fun anymore at all. And I had been to a doctor. This therapist asked me, he says, "Do you really drink as much as she says?" I said, "Hell yes, I do. I drink a lot. Who wouldn't? Married to a woman like that? I got two of the worst children you could possibly imagine. And I got the pressure on my job. The pressure alone will make you drink on that job. And so I drink. But you know, my family's never suffered. My kids have always had shoes. They've never missed a meal in their life. I don't know what they're griping about, you know. So I drink. What's the big deal?" And he said, "Have you ever thought about quitting?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I haven't." And I did. I thought about it every night. Starting tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, but not tonight. And but starting tomorrow, I'm going to quit. And he said, "Have you ever thought of going to AA?" And I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I've already been to AA." And I had gone to a meeting one time. And out there in California, some meetings, they give poker chips for various lengths of sobriety. You know, they have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I don't know if you do that around here or not. But this leader that night said, "Anyone just finished their first 30 days of sobriety? If so, come up and get your chip." And so here comes this guy up. And he got his chip, 30 days. And he says, "My name is Joe Blow. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm really proud to get this chip. I know this is a spiritual program, and I found God when I walked through the doors of AA, and it's the lights in the eyes of the people that just turn me on and keep me coming back to these meetings. Just before I came to this meeting tonight, I got a call from my boss, and he's made me general manager down at the plant." What a wonderful, glorious way of life this is. God bless every one of you. And then he sat down and I was, oh, God. Anyone else that finished their first 30 days? And here comes this lady. My name's Mary Smith, and I'm an alcoholic, and I found God when I walked through the doors of AA. And it's the lights in the eyes of the people that just turn me on, keep me coming back to these meetings. I love every single person here. And, you know, my children, when I see them now, they look at me with respect in their eyes. And my husband is looking at me with renewed interest. And what a glorious way of life this is. God bless every single one of you here. And sat down. Oh, God. And I never went back. That's it. That's AA. that's what I thought. Yeah. And so after this, my wife had been with me and heard, that is, she had been with, I went to a doctor about this, and he advised me to go to AA. And I told him, I'm not going to go to AA. I want some antabuse. I read about some stuff called antabuse, and I said, I think I'll get a hold of some of that. I am going to quit because I'm sick of her griping about my drinking. And I think I'll get some of the antabuse. So just in case I feel like taking a drink, I'll pop one of those antabuse pills or whatever they are. I never have seen it. And, you can't drink on top of that. You can get sick. In fact, according to this article I read, there's been people that have died drinking on top of antabuse. And so I think I'll get some. And so he put me in touch with this doctor. And the doctor's receptionist says, don't drink for at least 48 hours prior to coming on the appointment. And I didn't drink for 2 days prior to going on the appointment. And I said, I'm here for, antabuse. Oh yes, the doctor will see you. And so the doctor checked my heart and my blood pressure, and he called me into his office, closed the door. Oh God. And then he started lecturing me on the disease of alcoholism. I'm like, God, I wasn't there to hear some lecture. He was telling me about how people with the disease of alcoholism have character defects. And they fail to cope with things. They put off coping. They put off solving their problems. Instead, they get drunk tonight. And then the next morning they wake up, they still got all their troubles and all their problems, only now they got a hangover on top of it. And it's a never-ending thing. They just do it over and over again. And I should have identified, but I didn't. And he just went on and on and on about the disease of alcoholism. He pulled a book out of his bookshelf and started reading how people try to enjoy and control their drinking by switching from scotch to brandy and stuff like that. I know now that he read a portion of chapter 3 to me. And I finally said, he says, he told me, he says, if you haven't had a drink for 48 hours prior to coming here, you need never drink again, as long as you live. And God, that guy scared me. I was prepared to quit, but not quite that long. Not at that time. Now I could see that, but not right then. I just wanted to prove something to her. But he wouldn't stop, and he just kept going on and on and on. And I said, well, Doc, if you're not going to give me any antabuse, then I guess I better go. How much do I owe you? And he said, I can see I'm not making much of an impression on you, but I'm going to tell you something that I wouldn't tell most of my patients, but due to the nature of your appointment here, I assume you're having trouble with booze. And he says, my wife had trouble with booze. She's an alcoholic. And we've tried everything known to medical science. We've tried rest homes and sanitariums and drying out places and abuse and psychiatry and everything, and nothing's worked for her. But she's sober now. She goes to AA. And that's what I recommend that you do. And he says, promise me one thing. Promise me that you'll go to the Manhattan Beach Clubhouse and buy the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And there'll be no charge for this call. And that's the only thing that guy said that day that impressed me at all. And I drove up and got the book and threw it on my dresser and had another drink. What a crazy doctor. He could have had me as a steady customer and everything. I just thought he was weird. And my wife had been with me and heard all that. And so after this fiasco where she cut up my clothes, she went back to him and she asked him if he thought she was an alcoholic. And he said he didn't know for sure, and he gave her the 20 questions, and she passed an appropriate number correctly. And so he says, well, you're either an alcoholic or you ought to go to Al-Anon. And why don't you go to some meetings with my wife? She'd be happy to take you. And so she came home that night and she said, I'm going to go to AA with the doctor's wife. And, oh, God. Not that. You know? I told you what goes on there. You know? Some kind of a religious organization, a religious cult of some kind. I haven't been able to figure it out. It's okay for them if they want it, but not me, you know. And just remember what the name of the organization is. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. That means no names. Don't give them my name, whatever you do. We're not married, remember? We don't have a husband. I don't want anybody knocking on my door trying to convert me. So be careful. Besides, what makes you think that the doctor's wife is going to drive down from Palos Verdes in her Cadillac and pick you up in the dump we live in? And, well, I don't know. I spoke with her this afternoon. She said she'd be coming about 7:45. She's not coming in. She's just going to toot the horn. And I said, good, I don't want her in here. And so about 7:45, this doctor's wife drove up and tooted the horn. Off my wife went with her to AA. And the very first thing they told her in AA, the very first thing they told her was that it wasn't her fault that I drank. You know, they could have started her off with something entirely different. But they said, you know, don't carry that guilt around with you. You know, you can't make anybody drink. You know, just can't make. If he would have drank anyhow, whether you'd have met him or not. So don't carry that guilt around with you. Ruined everything. I had her just about halfway convinced that it was all her fault. And they also told her, don't try to make him quit either. You don't have that kind of power over anybody that you can make anybody quit drinking. You just don't have that power. So don't pour his booze down the sink. He'll just go buy some more. But if you think you've got a problem with alcohol, why don't you come back to these meetings and work on your problem? And just let that SOB drink himself to death if that's what he wants to do. It's his life. And she kind of liked the ring of that. So she went to meetings with the doctor's wife. And to be a good guy, I used to go to meetings with her occasionally. And I liked the speaker meetings. I heard guys like Clancy, Norman, John Harris, and guys, and I liked it, you know, and I got a lot of humor out of it, and I enjoyed that laughing, you know. I hadn't laughed for a long time. I had a peculiar sense of humor back then. The only time I'd laugh is if I saw you falling down and hurt yourself or something like that, then I'd laugh. But you know, I really enjoyed the speakers, and I wondered where they drank. But I really like to talk to them, you know, find out what's going on. But most of the meetings were the kind of meetings where they just sit around a table, and it appeared to me that one guy would start off and he'd tell a lie, and then everybody would try to top him. And that's the way it appeared to me. And it seemed like those same two people were at every meeting, you know. My name's Joe, and I'm an alcoholic, and this is a spiritual program. I found God when I walked through the doors of it. It's the lights in the eyes of the people that just turn me on and keep me coming back to these meetings, and I love every single person here. I just got word they've made me a full partner down at the plant. I'm taking delivery on my Mercedes in the morning. Just couldn't stand it. By now, Mary Smith is just so holy, she's practically got a halo, you know. My name's Mary Smith, and this is a spiritual program. And I walk hand in hand with God through the doors of AA. It's a wonderful life I've got going on. It's a life in the eyes of the people. Just a few short months ago, my children were failing in school. And now we're getting letters from all the major universities throughout offering scholarships. And I'm proud to stand up here tonight and tell you that my husband and I are a couple once again. Oh, jeez. Then we'd all hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer. How hokey can you get? And and then the meeting would end. And you think you can leave? Hell no, there's another meeting that starts immediately after the meeting ends. And these ladies, they could see them, they were coming at me. And I could just see them coming at me. It just seemed like fangs were coming out, and their claws were just, and just like little miniature Draculas coming out, looking for new blood. And they'd say, "Are you Lou's husband?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm Lou's husband." "Well, are you an alcoholic too?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not an alcoholic too. I'm a visitor here." And she's one, work on her. Yeah, I finally told her, I said, "I've gone to my last meeting, I can't stand it, but I know I'm an alcoholic." That's one thing I found out here. I know that I'm an alcoholic. So I'm going to quit. And I did, quit drinking a little bit before Thanksgiving. And I didn't go to any damn meetings, who needs them? And I was sober clear through Christmas. I remembered to buy Christmas presents and everything that year. I'm sure I must not have been the most pleasant person to be around, but by God, I was sober. Really sober. And the Saturday night after Christmas, my wife went to a meeting, and I stayed home. And I took a little mini inventory of the situation. And I said, if you haven't drank since before Thanksgiving, and here it is, past Christmas, you're not really an alcoholic after all. So I went to the store and bought a half a pint of vodka. And I no sooner got it back to the place, and what the hell did I buy a half pint for? I finished that and went and got a fifth. Went and got another fifth. And I drank all day Saturday, all Saturday night, and all day Sunday, and I closed the bar up at 2 a.m. and woke up the next morning at 10 o'clock, and I'm already an hour late to work. I've got this king-size hangover. I hadn't drank for over a month, and I poured all that alcohol into my system, and geez, I was sick. The sickest I ever been, I think. And so I went over to the bar a little early that day and got a glass of medicine. And that's a Bloody Mary. It's not really even a social drink. It's just a glass of medicine. And I had to have it to get straightened out. So the guy got a great big tall glass, put ice in it, shot of vodka, some tomato juice, squeezed a lime in it, some salt, and some Tabasco, and some Worcestershire sauce. Thought he'd never get the damn drink made. And I finally picked it up and I drank it straight down, and I slurped it all over my tie. Oh, nuts. And I said, "Make me another one." And I went to the restroom and cleaned the tomato juice off my tie. Came back and he said, "Did you want another Bloody Mary, or did you want a martini?" And I said, "Oh, just skip it." And I went over to the coffee shop section of this bar, and I had a sandwich and a glass of milk, and I haven't had a drink since. And that's been a little over 15 years ago. And my life... And, I've often thought, had I known that was going to be my last drink, I sure as hell wouldn't have had a Bloody Mary. Yeah, that's a rotten drink to end up on. I should have had like a martini or something in a fancy brandy snifter type glass or something like that. Drank it straight down and broke the glass. Stomped out of the bar, triumphant over alcohol. Yeah. But I wasn't aware of it. In fact, 2 or 3 weeks went by, and I found myself at AA meetings, of all places. Yeah. And 2 or 3 weeks went by, and I realized I haven't had a drink. And then anger set in. I just completed 30 years of drinking. I've got this rotten wife. I've got 2 of the worst children you could possibly imagine. The pressure job. I owe everybody money, and it's all past due. If the phone rings, I jump clear across the room. I know it's a bill collector. Someone knocks at the door. I know it's the police. I don't know what I've done, but I know I'm guilty. I'm ready to go. And now I can't even drink. Now they've taken that away from me too. What a tragedy. What have I got to look forward to the rest of my life? Nothing. That's what. I'll never, be able to do anything again. The only thing I ever learned to do sober was work. I can never do anything social again. Because everything I've ever learned in my entire life, romancing, dancing, whatever, I drank with it. I drank before, during, or after, and generally all three. And now I can't even drink. You can't even go to a nice restaurant ever again. What's the first thing they ask you when you go to a nice restaurant? Would you like to have a cocktail before dinner? And you can't tell the waitress, well, yeah, I'd like one, but you see, I've got this disease. And it's of a twofold nature. It's an allergy of the body coupled with an obsession of the mind. And if I even take one drink, I can't predict my behavior. If it wasn't for that, I'd sure have one. I used to think you had to explain all that to people. In fact, I used to spend a good part of my day explaining stuff to people that didn't want to hear the explanation. If I was standing on a street corner, somebody walked up, I started explaining what I was doing. I just had this need to explain my existence. And I'm trying to quit. I find myself explaining things to people now, and sometimes I can stop right in mid-explanation. And they never notice the difference. They really never notice the difference. People just don't listen to that stuff. They don't want to hear it. And I know I don't want to hear those excuses and explanations. I don't know why they would want to hear mine. And so I'm trying to quit. And practically everything that I knew, in fact, every single thing that I knew for sure has turned out to be all wrong. I thought I knew everything by the time I got here, and it turned out I didn't know a thing. For instance, I went to a nice restaurant just recently. The waitress came up and said, "Would you like a cocktail before dinner?" And I said, "No, thanks." It didn't faze her. Didn't even faze her. She just went to the next table and asked them, and they did. They're always drinking over there at the next table. I'm the only guy in the whole place not drinking, but I drank for 30 years. I drank 60 years worth in 30, so I don't need any more. But the hard thing for me to accept is that they don't really care if you drink or not. That was one of my reservations about coming to AA. What are they going to say when they find out I don't drink? Well, they don't give a damn. Well, we can make a big deal out of it around here, but they don't care out there. They really don't. And, but the thing that bothers me sometimes, after 15 years of sobriety, I'll go to a nice restaurant, and I'll look over at the next table, and they're drinking martinis over there, and sometimes it looks attractive to me. I see a little drop kind of melting down the side of the glass. And they're well-dressed people. They're sitting there, and they're clicking the glasses. You can see the olive, the pimento in there. And it just kind of looks attractive to me. I'm like, God, don't think that. It's no good for you. You've had your share, forget it. But that just shows you, that I'm not, you're looking at a sick man here, I'm not well. I'm not well. And I know that a lot of guys have gone out and drank after a lot more time than I've got. And I hope I never have to drink again. But when I have one of those experiences, I've definitely made up my mind that when I die, I'm going to leave my brain to science. Because then they can look at my brain and see what a real alcoholic brain looks like. And I'm sure what they'll do is they'll take my brain, they'll put it down in a solution, this alcoholic solution. And it'll just kind of quiver, you know. And then it'll probably kind of settle down. And then it's going to say, ah. But until then, I'm going to call my sponsor all the time. I'm going to read the big book. I'm going to go to as many meetings as I can. I'm going to come to New Orleans or any damn place else that they want me to talk. I'm going to go because I don't want to ever drink again. I want to maintain my sobriety because I do know that guys with a lot more sobriety than me have gone out and drank again. And I'm going to go to as many meetings as I can and keep the enthusiasm up. And like Debbie was talking about that fellow that she met again, you know, and he had that 1.5 years of enthusiasm. I hope I can maintain that. Every once in a while I lose it, but boy, I want to keep it. And crowds like this and friends like Johnny Harris and people that, you know, that are active in the group, all the groups, I know, you know, that I'm going to be okay if I keep hanging in here with the winners. And I'll bring you up to date in my personal life. I've got 15 years of sobriety. My wife has 15 years of sobriety. But you know, I've got more sobriety than she has. How could that possibly be? She went to AA before me. Well, she didn't hear the part about the pills. See, where I come from, you're not sober if you're still taking those pills or smoking those funny cigarettes. And they won't acknowledge you being sober if you're doing that where I am from. And so her sponsor, she thought they were talking about the kind of pills that you smuggle in from Mexico in your hubcap or something. They're not prescription pills. And her sponsor says, yeah, you've messed up with those two. You've overdone those two. Flush them down the toilet. And she did. You know, I took my last drink, I hope, on December the 29th, 1969. And she flushed her pills down the toilet on January the 1st, 1970. And if you'll notice, there's a whole year difference. I've got seniority in my household, by God. And she's a newcomer. She's got to bring me coffee anytime I want it. And my son, he used to look at me so funny back in those days. Well, part of the reason he was looking at me funny, it turns out he was stoned out of his gourd. It seemed like he had a problem with booze too, and pills and LSD and all those things. And I'll be damned if he didn't turn himself into AA when he was 21 years old, and he's coming up here in May for 12 years. And our daughter sends you greetings from Al-Anon. And we're an AA family. And we weren't any kind of a family 15 years ago. And we're still not the best family on the block. I wouldn't want to try to snow anybody around. But we've all got a chance because we've all got programs. And things are pretty good. I never thought my son would ever get a job. And he's a very successful young businessman in the San Fernando Valley. Makes twice as much money as I do. I just resent the hell out of it. But never had to suffer near as much as I did. And he's a speaker. He speaks quite a bit. And he was the speaker one time at the Palm Springs Roundup. That's a pretty big deal where I come from. And there's like 1,800 people sitting out in the audience. And he was the young people's speaker 4 or 5 years ago. And he got a brand new suit and had his hair styled and new shoes and just looking great, you know, nice tie and everything. And just really proud to see him. He looked great. And he got up on the stage there, and there's all these people out in the audience. And my wife and I were sitting out there. And he said, "My name is Matt Johnson. I'm an alcoholic, and I also use drugs." He said, I'm the son of a drunken mother and a drunken father. My wife and I looked at each other and just burst into tears. We were just so damn proud. And about all, you know, you're going to learn all about the program from other speakers because, you know, I've worked in steps, but I'm not very sincere. I belong in this big group in Los Angeles, and I was with a bunch of guys that were all sober about the same time, and they'd always check with me, and they want to know, what step are you on? And I'd say, what step are you on? They'd say, I'm on step 2. Well, I'm on step 3. I always tried to keep one step ahead of them. But you know, I finally, when I said that, then I had to do it, and so I got through the steps. And I'll be damned if I haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, just as if I'd have been sincere in the first place. It doesn't seem to matter. You work them, you know. You don't analyze them, all that. You just work the steps. And so here I am, 15 years, plus a couple of months of sobriety, and feeling pretty good. And about the only thing I can tell you is that when I see my children now, they look at me with respect in their eyes. And I'm proud to stand up here tonight and tell you that my wife and I are a couple once again. And you know, it turns out that I'm kind of a slow learner, but I found out this is a spiritual program. But I found God when I walked through the door. And you know, it's the lights in the eyes of the people that just turn me on and keep me coming back. And I thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.